Hello and welcome everyone again for the another class of theory of automata and formal languages. Now, in the last lecture you would like to recall that Turing machine was discussed. That what is a Turing machine, what does a Turing machine does, and what are the boundaries of the Turing machine. In fact, the Turing machine defines the boundaries of the computation. So, that we have already seen. Now, moving next step ahead, we will be talking today about decidability and the associated languages, like which languages are decidable, non-decidable, and thereof the recursive languages and recursively enumerable languages. Although this topic is a vast topic and requires substantial amount of deliberations, but I think in a very short lecture of this I would like to give you an overview of the definitions of recursively enumerable language, recursive languages, some properties of these languages, and what are the interrelation between various members of this class of languages. So, in this endeavor I would like to pose you a question that can we decide problems by computer program. So, every problem can be decided by a computer program is a fundamental question that we are asking. Indeed, the answer is no. There are certain class of problems which can be programmed to be solved by a computer, or in other words by a theoretical machine like Turing machine, and there are certain problems which are not at all solvable through the computer programs. So, the question is which are those problems, how do we identify those problems, or in other words how do we identify the language expressing those problems. Now, at the same time it is very pertinent to mention that every problem that is a computable problem can be encoded, and when we encode them in some sort of binary string or so, then every instance of the problem actually forms the language of the problem. Now, so at the very bottom level of the discussion we will talk about the problems in terms of languages, and the member of those languages are basically the instances of those problems. Then finally, we will talk about the relating languages, that is how one language is related to another language in its class. Okay. So, a language is a recursively enumerable language if there is a Turing machine that accepts L, but at the same time we do not know whether the language which is not acceptable by Turing machine is decided or not. So, the machine halts arbitrary or is actually looping at somewhere is not at all known. Now, if a Turing machine does not accepts L, then it does nothing. So, in fact, it is not a total function, it is a partial function. Only acceptable languages are acceptable languages by Turing machine are recursively enumerable languages. A language L is a recursive language that accepts. So, it has a property of recursively enumerable language, but at the same time it halts on every input. So, whether the language is not acceptable by Turing machine, that does not matter, it halts at certain state, and therefore, these languages are known as or called as decidable languages. So, recursive languages are decidable languages and recursively enumerable languages are undecidable language. In another words, all the computer programs that we see like sorting, searching, etc. So, they are actually enumerated languages which are basically decidable languages, or they are recursive programs or recursive language. Now, all regular and context free languages are recursive. So, they are decidable. All programming languages are recursive languages that I just told. Now, the basic question that we are posing over here is that is there any recursively enumerable language that is not recursive. So, if there is a class of language which is outside recursive, so that is not regular, that is not context free, in other words there is no computer program that can solve it. Now, is there a language which is not even recursively enumerable? So, if the domain is outside the recursively enumerable as well. So, we will take a interrelation between all this, and then is there is a problem whose solutions are even not recognizable by a Turing machine. So, all decidable problems are those problems whose solutions can be recognized by a Turing machine, but their solutions are not known because they are not decidable. So, we will see what are the interrelation among all these languages and how they are related through each other as far as their classes are concerned. Now, complement. So, we will talk about a theorem over here to understand more about the property of a recursive language. So, complement of a recursive language is also recursive. So, how to prove this statement? Now, suppose there is a language L which is a recursive language, and we can always construct a Turing machine, let us say M prime, and this machine can consist of a Turing machine within it, and this Turing machine can accept any language, and because it is a recursive language, this we all know. So, it can accept or it can reject. All right. Now, now if we construct M prime such that we make this reject as an accept and accept as reject, then any language which is inputted to this will in fact go to this and will have accept or rejecting states. So, meaning by we can input a language over here, this can be supplied to this Turing machine by flipping the accept and reject state. So, therefore, the complement of the language which is L prime will be accepted by M prime. So, in other words, we put it like this, now language of M is a recursive language. Now, if x belongs to this, we can always say that the complement of x will belong to, sorry, if y belongs to the complement of L, then the language exhibited by M prime will in fact be accepted by this language. So, we can always prove it like this, and if a language is recursive, then its complement is also going to be a recursive language. All right. Now, we move to the next slide, and another theorem which is very interesting is that a language L is recursive if and only if. So, notice this particular word, if L and its complement both are recursively enumerable. So, how to prove this? Again, we will try to construct a Turing machine, and there are two Turing machines which are running in parallel, M 1 and M 2. Remember, this Turing machine can accept a language which is not capable of rejecting it, because it is a partial function. It does not know what happens if the favorable language is not given to it, and the complement of it is being given to M 2, and this accepts it. So, it means a language W is given, a word W is given. So, W is accepted by M 1, W prime is accepted by M 2, and if we in fact encode it as a reject state, then a language is recursive. So, this is a recursively enumerable language, this is a recursively enumerable language. Now, the language is accepted by M 1, its complement is accepted by M 2, and therefore, if both are accepted, then one can work as a reject, and then W will become a recursive language. So, we can always have an outline of the proof. I will not say that is the exact proof, because it needs time, and in this lecture there is not enough time to deliberate upon that, but at least this is the outline of the proof which can actually exhibit the fact that if L and its complement both are recursively enumerable, then this can be a recursive language. Okay. Now, now before I in fact go into the deeper detail of their interrelation, what is the interrelation between recursively enumerable language and a recursive language, let us try to understand that how they are related as far as their class is concerned. Now, here we have a class of recursive language, and all you can say context free languages are recursive, all regular languages are recursive, and this is recursively enumerable language. So, recursively enumerable language is a larger set. So, every recursive language is recursively enumerable as well. So, this is a broad relation between them. Now, what we are trying to see is that the class of languages that are existing over here, is there any interrelation between these languages which are recursively enumerable, or is there a relation between recursive languages as well. So, we will try to define a concept of reducibility of a language, and reducibility of the language suggests that if suppose x belongs to a language L and we define a total computable function. So, it means that this function is a Turing function which is a total function. So, it computes actually the value of f x, f is a total function, and then this f x actually belongs to, let us say, another language L 2. So, what is the relation between L 1 and L 2 is the question. Now, in case f x belongs to L 2, which is obtained by applying a Turing computable function f over x, then x will also be having the same property. So, interrelation is that if L is recursively enumerable, then L 2 will also be a recursively enumerable, and vice versa. So, if if x does not belongs to L 1, only f x does not belongs to L 2. So, there are both ways implications, right. If f x belongs to L 2, only if x belongs to L 1, and also if f x does not belong to L 2, then x does not belongs to L 1. So, L 1 can be a recursive language, L 1 can be a recursively enumerable language, and so on so forth. So, now, so f is a reduction function. Reduction function must be total, Turing computable, and we can mathematically express it for all computational purposes. Now, if we look at if you look at reduction as a proof trick, then why are we defining reducible function? Like if a language is recursively enumerable, then another language can also be characterized as a recursively enumerable language. So, this way by applying f multiple times, we can define a large class of language and having the property of recursively enumerable. Now, from a non-recursive enumerable language, we can also do a reducibility to suggest that the language is non-recursively enumerable. Okay. So, there is a correction in this one. Now, if a language is recursively enumerable, then its reduction is also recursively enumerable. Let us try to construct a Turing machine like this. So, if we give an input like w, then we define a function f which actually computes f w, and f w can be supplied to a Turing machine which is actually accepting it. Now, this Turing machine m prime which does this can actually be said to be recursively enumerable. So, this is a mapping of the function. So, if f w is actually is a member of a recursively enumerable language which is accepted by a Turing machine m, then w will also be accepted by a Turing machine which is actually constructed using f. So, that is the theorem, and this is the outline, proof outline through which we can prove this. Now, if a language is recursive, then its reduction is also recursive. Why? I would like you to answer, but let me actually provide the answer, because every recursive language is recursively enumerable. We have just now seen that how they are interrelated. Therefore, this is a corollary of this theorem and this automatically applies to this as well. Now, if a language is non-recursive enumerable, then its reduction is also non-recursive enumerable. So, I will leave you with this particular theorem to do the proof by yourself, and this is by contraposition. So, you already know by the theory of logic that if A implies B, then not B implies not A, and using that we can always have. So, giving a proof hint, if a language is recursively enumerable, then language B is also recursively enumerable, because one is reduced to another. So, therefore, if it is non-recursively enumerable, can imply that its reduction is also non-recursively enumerable, and because non-recursively enumerable language is non-recursive as well. So, a corollary can directly follow from the same logic. So, this was a lecture, in fact, giving an outline of the properties of the recursive language, recursively enumerable language, their interrelation, and particularly focusing upon reducibility, which can be used to define a large class of large class of languages. Why I am talking about this? Because this theory can finally lead to the issues of polynomially solvable problems, NP problems, NP-hard problems, and so on and so forth, because there is a close relation with this theoretical foundation to NP-hard, NP-complete problems as well, which is a very significant question, an important question in the discussions of the computer science. So, I hope this might have helped you in basically getting the definitions of the topics, the proof outlines to see that how proofs can be constructed, how simple they are to understand, and learning something about their properties. Okay. So, up till now we have seen that what are the properties of recursive languages, recursively enumerable languages, and non-recursive enumerable languages. Now, let us look at some of its applications. Why are we doing all this? Now, I was just talking about its relation to NP completeness, NP complete, NP hard problems, and polynomially solvable problems. Now, moving next to it, if you recall that how Turing machine works, then Turing machine works upon reading large tape, and the heads of the tape actually moves either in right direction or in left direction. Now, the point is that the complexity of any Turing machine, which is in fact a computer program, is decided by how many number of steps the machine takes before deciding a language. And you already know that recursive languages are basically the computer programs which are decidable. So, they are all regular languages or they are context free languages. Now, the number of steps it takes in fact defines the discrete computational steps which are required. No matter what computer that you choose, it may be a very high megaflops computer, it might be very slow computer, but the number of steps by and large will remain as it is. Now, if you actually move towards the complexity theory, these steps define that how many steps will precisely be needed, and then we have a concept of asymptotic notations, and asymptotic notations in fact characterize that how this can be expressed in terms of a simple mathematical function. So, for example, suppose we write a program and the number of steps in fact are, so I will write it as an fn. Suppose number of steps are computed as this. Now, this is hard to express, and you know, for variety of programs, the number of steps the head of the Turing machine takes may vary from one to another, and it can be very complicated function. Now, how to simplify this? For this simplification, we have another notion of expression, and this expression is through the function called asymptotic notation. Now, asymptotic notation in fact is an approximation of this function, provided there are certain conditions. Those conditions are, normally computer programs are written for large quantities of data. So, for small quantities of data, for example, if you are doing sorting of n numbers, then it can be done manually and there is no computer program needed for that. So, n is going to be very, very large, and we are more interested in fact in having a comparison of two Turing machines. So, if you recall my earlier lecture, I already exhibited this fact that Turing machine 1 can be equated to Turing machine 2 if both accepts the same language. Now, if both accept the same language, in other words both decide the same language, for in the case of recursive languages, then these two Turing machines can be equated. To put it more simple, that suppose there is a problem of sorting, which is a recursive language, can be sorted using one algorithm like quick sort. It can be solved through merge sort, it can be solved through bubble sort, and so on and so forth, and all these sorting programs can be equated. So, they are basically Turing machines. The question is that how can you judge upon that which Turing machine performs better than the other. I am not talking about space complexity at the moment, but let us focus upon the number of heads movement, or in other words the time complexity. Now, the function which exhibits the total number of function movements with respect to the size of the data will vary from one to another, from one Turing machine to another Turing machine. So, therefore, we are in fact interested in comparing these two functions rather than calculating its absolute value. So, the assumptions are that n is very large, we are only interested in comparisons, and in that case these terms of the polynomial which are having lower degree than the highest term polynomial become insignificant for large values of n, and these constants are also insignificant because we are trying to compare. So, suppose there is a function f prime and there is a function f double prime, which is something like let us say n to the power 1.5 minus 3 n minus 6, and we want to compare these two. So, these terms will become insignificant for large n's, and these constants are also not important, and in that case we will ignore this, and for comparison purpose we are only interested in their ratio, that this is n square and n. So, we actually formulate a notion of asymptotic notation. So, we can say that this can be represented as this, and the second one can be represented as n to the power 1.5, which is an approximate representation of how many number of steps Turing machine is going to take. Now, this is useful for the comparison purpose, and it is a very primitive thing because it has a detailed definition. So, mathematically this will be defined while you study computer algorithms, and there are many other asymptotic notations as well, like theta notation, omega notation, big O, small o notation, small omega notation, and so on and so forth, which is a topic which is out of context at this point of time, but the idea was to give you overall concept that why are we in fact focusing about decidability and undecidability of the languages. So, all decidable languages can be judged in terms of their time complexity. Now, important point is that the languages which can be decidable in polynomial type are defined as P languages. The languages which are undecidable are basically NP problem, and they are non-deterministically polynomial decidable problem. So, the reducibility function that we just now talked about in the previous slide in fact helps to identify that what are NP problems, what are P problems, and how can we define NP complete problem. The question is to find out those class of languages which belong to NP and NPC class, and how to prove that a new problem which comes out belongs to either of these two sets, because they are interrelated. So, this interrelatability is in fact derived through the reducibility and the associated properties. So, I just give you a hint that in which direction we want to lead to. In fact, all such things will be covered in detail while you do an algorithm course, but do not forget this automata theory course or this decidability that we have talked about just now is a prerequisite to understand the foundational concepts of NP and NP complete problems. So, with this I will wrap up and will expect you to do more by using your textbook. Thank you very much.